Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thrivecast. You know, we try to learn how to grow firms here on the Thrivecast. We've been doing this for so many years, and it's always helpful to have people who know how to run firms, run businesses. And our guest today has really done it in a big way. And so we're going to learn a lot of his journey. We have Brett Kelly. He's the founder and CEO of Kelly Partners Group. Really big firm, started in Australia and really on the Australian stock exchange, which is pretty amazing. That's not normal in the U.S. So that's a really great way that they've grown. And now Brett is in the U.S. and growing across the U.S. Has some great books. I got access to a lot of his books. And a lot of the stories that he's gleaned from a lot of Australian business people. Just amazing wisdom that we can learn from Brett. So, Brett, welcome to the Thrivecast. It's great to have you on the show.
Jason, thank you for making the time for
Yeah,
me.
well, we really appreciate you doing that. We know you're really busy, um, and I guess it is unusual to have an accounting firm enter itself into a public market like you've done in Australia. But is that normal in Australia for firms to grow large enough to be on the Australian Stock Exchange?
Yeah, so Jason, we started the firm in 2006, my wife Rebecca and I, and we'd seen through our careers as accountants that accounting firms are great businesses, but generally very poorly run. And when I say that, often accountants get defensive, but I say, look, my standard is say Apple or Microsoft or Walmart or McDonald's, some of the world's best businesses, and versus those businesses, they're quite poorly run. What we worked out was that if we could build a better environment for people, clients, and the communities with a focus on private business owners, clear strategy to make a difference, that we could probably help a lot of accountants operate better firms than they were able to do outside that partnership. And so the reason that we publicly listed in 2017, which was 11 years after we started the firm, was that part of the problem with accounting firms is that, there are some benefits to being private and some benefits to being public. But principally, my view was that the next 25 years, certainly next 50 years, there'll be more transparency and it makes more sense to be public. I have always said that the firms that I'd worked in couldn't have behaved in public the way they behaved in private. And so that's why they're private. It's not that they couldn't be public. It's just that if they were, they'd have to operate as more professional businesses. And typically the partners didn't really want to behave that professionally, to be fair. I started at Price Waterhouse in 1993 as an undergraduate cadet. It was a very good firm, spent 4 years there, went into an investment bank, lost my job, didn't know what I wanted to do, turned around, interviewed 34 of Australia's leading achievers from business and arts, politics, and asked them how they achieved their goals, and then went back into accounting, with this whole life education with a different view of, what an accounting firm could be. And so, the least interesting, I guess, part of our journey is the fact that we're publicly traded, but it's sort of interesting in other respects because it speaks to our people's preparedness to be transparent and public with what we're trying to achieve. So we did list in 2017. We've returned 9.5 times people's investment since inception. It is the best performing publicly traded accounting group anywhere in the world. And so in January 2023, my wife and I moved here with our now 19, 17-year-old and 12-year-old kids, put them in school, bought a house, and started looking to build partnerships with firms in America. Now, there are no Australian-owned accounting firms in America, notwithstanding that there's many Australians.
That's right.
And so Los Angeles was the first place to start, 60,000 Australians, no Australian accounting firms. And so we started here, firm in Woodland Hills and Burbank, group office in Malibu, and a small rep office down in Newport, Balboa Island, and now growing into San Angelo in Texas, St. Petersburg in Florida, and Cary in North Carolina.
Yeah. There is a very large firm in the U.S. called CBiz, and that one is publicly traded. And are your goals similar in the U.S. here to be public or?
Yeah. Yeah, so our plan is, it's been publicly disclosed. We expect to become a publicly traded company here in the US, move our listing from Australia to the US. There is only one publicly traded accounting group in America, it's CBIZ. We think there should be two. Their revenues are, say, a billion plus market, nearly 2 billion. Ours are sort of 150 million. So we've got a way to go. Models are very different. So where CBIZ and others, PE-backed firms are sort of buying 100% of firms and have an eye on how quickly they can do things. We do 51-49 partnerships with founder-led firms with 2 to 10 million of revenues, where those founders want to make sure that their people, clients, and communities are positively impacted rather than sort of chewed up and spat out.
I see. Okay, so it may be true in Australia too, but private equity is really, buying up a lot of firms here in the U.S. and a lot are still wondering what will be the effect of that, in 4 or 5 years. It seems to be helping some firms and not necessarily helping others, and so we're still wondering how that will work out. And so you sound like really the opposite of private equity and maybe its goals, especially if you want the owners you acquire to retain, some percentage of the ownership. It sounds like you want them to be pretty focused in their communities and things like that. Is that true? You have an opposite view of how private equity may perform acquisitions.
So 15 years ago, what's happening now in America happened in Australia, and the results are, publicly available for anyone that wants to study them. America's got so many great strengths, and I love to be here and find it incredibly positive. Its biggest weakness is because of the size of the market, you don't really need to look outside the market. And so, it's my view that very few of these people understand, the Australian experience, which is a very sophisticated, very well run accounting market. So the way I think about it is the foundation and internal power of a firm is based on the mission, values, and vision of that firm. On the other hand, you've got private equity, which is got no mission, got no values, and got no vision. What they do have is a checkbook, a spreadsheet, and an exit date. And so one's a body with a soul and one's a body with no soul. And so you just have to make the decision as to whether you want, a soulless organization or one with a soul. And that's no judgment. The reality is that the big firms being sold to private equity are largely run by descendants of the founders. We largely partner with founders and their immediate successors. These large firms that are being sold by private equity here are really being sold by baby boomers who didn't build the place, don't really particularly care what happens yesterday, let alone what happens tomorrow, and are just interested in a check. Now, they might put up various protestations about that, but private equity are there for a short time, not a long time. I sort of describe it as a diddy party. It's probably fun while you're there, but might not be in your long-term best interest. And that'll prove to be the case here in the US as it has in
Yeah,
Australia.
that's interesting that the market in Australia, which we've known it to be kind of a sophisticated way that they've operated firms for quite a long time. And so, are you saying private equity tried to move into the Australian market as well 15 years ago? And are you saying you can look back now and see examples of that being a failure?
Well, there were three large private equity backed firms. They all listed on the Australian Stock Exchange. Two of them went broke, and one of them went so badly that it was taken private. The most analogous situation here in America is Focus Financial, which is a roll up of independent financial advisors. It went public, never really performed beyond its IPO price. 2 years later, the PE backers were out, and the thing floundered and was bought by another PE group and taken private. So these examples have been seen before. The playbook is not changed. The results will be the same. And while the music's playing, everyone's dancing. But when the music stops, or as Buffett says, you know, you don't really know who's swimming naked until the water goes out. The tide goes out. And so it's no disparagement of those. I don't. The idea that there's some owners of big firms with unfunded partner liabilities that want somebody to bail them out so they can retire and not have to think about the mess they created. Largely, you know, a bunch of baby boomers that made accounting firms a place that you wouldn't want your children to work, um, or your worst enemy in many cases. They don't, this way, they don't really need to self-reflect, take responsibility for that, nor improve the situation. Now, most importantly, the offer for a partner, a young person on track to become a partner, means that they never really have ownership. They have a very, small interest, not much influence, and feel more like an employee than an owner, or a partner. And so, what we call our partner owner driver model allows these senior partners and their up and coming partners and partners to be partners in a genuine partnership, to be owners in a genuine way, in a predictable way, and one that's not sort of at the whim of private equity sponsors or the stock market, and drivers, local leaders of their firms that are brand ambassadors and make a difference in for their people, clients, and communities where they play. It's been very successful in Australia. We have 38 firms globally, and the firms are twice as profitable as the average accounting firm. They use 1/3 of the working capital, and partners get about 25% of their time back. We have a 38-person central management team that works under the firms and supports those businesses. So it is a different way of coming at it. It's it's more the emphasis on difference. It's relationship based, not transactional. And frankly, I think when a senior person rounds up their people and sells their people to somebody who's just wanting to sell their people, I'm not sure that's a positive experience for anyone.
Yeah. Well, has the Australian market, because in the U.S. we recognize the way a lot of firm partners, a very consensus basis type operating model, where they kind of maintain their own book of business and pull as much cash out of that business as they possibly can for themselves is and that's not sustainable. And of course, not anything anybody wants to actually purchase or own. And so, is that what Australia went through as well? They didn't really essentially have a corporate model that would allow them to scale and grow based on mission and values. Is that similar?
Yeah.
The,
Yeah, it's just there's two types of people, Jason. There are missionaries and there are mercenaries. There are self-centered people and there are other people, you know, people. And so you've got to decide whether you are an other person-centered person or a self-centered person, whether you're long-term or short-term. And so if you look at the industry, many of the partners I work for, and many of the boomers as a generation have been self-centered, short-term, um, and not really thinking about anyone, the firm or its future. The structure of a partnership is such that it can't retain profit, so it lends itself to having the partners pull every dollar they can out of the business as soon as they can, and it doesn't lead to a culture of reinvestment. Because the partners haven't made a long-term commitment to the business, they're not really incentivized to invest in the business. And so there's some ways to fix that, but our argument would be that the only way to fix that culture, if you like, is to have people with a sense of mission, with a certain set of values, and a vision of the difference that they can make. Now, we can also prove you make more money behaving like this in the short term and the long term, but the expedient way is to simply sell a firm, take a check, and run off and hope you never have to think about it again. But that's much of how that generation has lived. If you look at the leadership of these firms, they've made accounting unattractive to talented people because the leadership has been very backward, has not treated people well, has taken an undue share to themselves versus others, hasn't had a relationship-based mindset nor a long-term mindset. And so young people have just rejected that and said, I don't want to work with those types of people. Now, when I meet a 65, 70-year-old leader of a large firm and say, hey, what's gone wrong? They normally say it's the candidate's fault. It's got nothing to do with them. We would simply say, well, that might not be entirely the case. It might have something to do with younger people's assessment of the leadership behavior of those firms. And so really they're left with no choice but to sell to some other mercenary organization, that's fine. We're trying to build something different. So typically, Jason, the people we partner with, there's a gentleman or a woman who's spent most of their waking hours building this amazing firm, poured their blood, sweat, and tears and heart and soul into this thing, and it's their baby. And they care a lot about who would be a good permanent custodian of this ecosystem and culture that they've built, this group of people that they've carefully put together. And so what we say is we won't come over the top like a corporate, we'll come under the firm and lift it up, get rid of the dross and the non-recoverable time the partners spend, have that done by specialists in a central team, and free them up to actually lead their people and their clients and make an impact in the community. The central argument is that all of life is leadership, and leadership depends on the values, the mission, the values, and the vision of the person. So you can't be a leader if you've got the wrong values. Well, you can, but it'll be quite destructive. So that's what we think. We think we've grown at 30% a year on average every year for 18 years in a row. We think we can do that for a long time, and we think over time we'll make more impact.
Yeah. Well, it seems to be playing out that way. You know, for you, especially in Australia, you've now got a track record on the stock exchange, right? That's data you can look at. And I know you do, in some of the videos I can watch of you or that anybody can see, you go through a lot of that data very specifically, to prove that out. And do you think a lot of the way, and we'll just say baby boomers, I know it could be a certain type of leader, but the way they have run firms in the country, very specifically, we know that that's in the Big Four in the U.S. That is a really rough place to work, to start your early career, but a lot of people do it. Has that driven the lack of labor coming into the accounting profession or sitting for the CPA exam? Because that's all dropped.
Absolutely.
Okay, you think, yeah.
So if you think about the self-centered nature of the behavior of the leadership, it looks a little bit like, let's make the CPA take so long and cost so much money that a young person can do a simple ROI calculation and say that doesn't make sense. The big firms controlled that process so that they could have people who were graduates who were essentially indentured servants for an extended number of years while they finished their CPA. Those firms weren't confident that they were creating a great place to work that people wanted to be in. So they thought, well, let's trap them in here with this, half-assed qualification that takes twice as long to do as a master's, but isn't a master's. So it's the same in Australia. And so it was like, let's lock these people into a situation that is not in their interest and hope that works out well. Well, it worked out well, but for a while, but given that most Westerners have no children, family trees don't look like this, they look like this. So at some point, there weren't going to be many kids, and so labor's constrained. And so your kids now have options, and they look at that and they say, why do I want to be trapped in this little rat wheel designed by these small, mean, and scared people? I probably don't want to do that. And so the philosophical shift that has to happen is the firm has to say, how do we lead from the bottom up and create an environment where we're genuinely interested in making this person better off? So the first thing that's got to happen is the CPA has got to be reformed. It cannot take longer to become a chartered accountant in Australia than it does to become a doctor. That's ridiculous. Most of the partners I worked for as a young guy, they didn't even have a university degree. It was a trade, it wasn't a profession, right? In terms of a degree-based profession. But then they made the levels to jump over higher and higher and more costlier for the next generations. It's now reached a point where it just doesn't work. That's the first thing. Secondly, in terms of the type of leadership, the great generation, I think, were known for their community service. And I think it's fair to say the boomer generation hasn't been. And surely that ethos of individual self-empowerment or realization or individualism generally has affected workplaces. And so young people have said, well, I'm not sure I want to be part of this team. The third bit is the older guys and girls often have hung around too long, taking too much of the pie in a sort of ungenerous way, probably to fund their third divorce. Um, and that has meant that the gap of the age of the leadership, 65 to 70, versus the average age of the employee that you want, between 25 and 35, is too big. So when a 70-year-old man goes into a bar looking for a girlfriend, he doesn't normally date a 25 to 30-year-old unless it's for money. And so the profession for years relied on money as, "Oh, I'll pay you more and you can come work here." But eventually people said, "Well, I don't really want to work with a 70-year-old if I'm 25." And that doesn't mean that in our firms we keep the much older partners. We've got an active 80-year-old, 5 days a week. But we've said the leadership of that firm has to transition genuinely over time to the younger partners, and you contribute as a mentor and a leader in the way that you can when you're much older. So everyone gets the benefit of the energy of the young guys with the wisdom of the older guys and girls, and it all works. So that's kind of the third big challenge. Um, and then I think generally in terms of keeping up with skills, business skills, to say, who's our client? Who's our ideal client and what do they value? And how do we put to them a proposition that they want to pay for? And how do we make sure they pay an appropriate price so we can pay our people an appropriate salary? I think the firms fell very much behind in basic business skills around positioning, presenting their proposition, and winning the pricing game. So there's a lot of issues in firms. We try to partner with firms, and with a 204-point checklist, developed over 85 partnerships that we've pulled together into 38 operating businesses. We've learned a lot about what works and what doesn't, and how to change a firm from the inside
Yeah.
out.
And it sounds like, I mean, Brett, you have a really long view of
Yeah,
business building, which
yeah, we're trying to build a 100-year business,
yeah, which
and I think
is too slow
that
for a lot of
that
people.
changes everything.
It's it can,
Well,
I don't know.
you'd like to think that you could plant some trees. You know, I guess fundamentally we believe that what gives meaning to your life is the difference that you make to other people. And so we'd like to think we can run the business in a way that's sustainable today and plant trees today that people can sit under tomorrow. And we don't think those things are mutually exclusive. So that time horizon difference, so a mission versus mercenary, long term versus short term, 100 years versus 3 to 5 years with private equity, that informs every decision and every part of the business and the way people behave.
Yeah. And yeah, that long-term view, and again, you're kind of giving us a long-term view where you're saying private equity is a short-term cash run, and long-term we know what that's going to look like. And it is because accounting firms are, and we've been running ours for over 20 years, and it is an intimate place. It is full of relationships. Every day is leadership. All of life is leadership, like you said. And it really is a place where you can see a lot of your clients and your team lives change. And of course, you're changed a lot the way you fail to lead and the way you're challenged by other smart people. And so those are a lot of long term effects. But when you're older, you can be wiser and more joyful after having gone sometimes through a lot of those hardships of growing a business over
Yeah.
30, 40, and 50 years.
And to your point, Jason, many of our partners, they've not only grown a business, they've built a marriage, they've raised a family, they've got 10 grandkids. These are people with gigantic life experience that, I always think of like the iceberg. You don't see it all, but it's all there. And so firms have been too quick to throw out those older guys. They've also not engaged them in a sort of respectful and intense way, if you like, to get them to change and step up and contribute in the ways that they can, given their unique experience. Um, but yeah, these are, I just genuinely believe a long-term mentality makes all the
Yeah.
difference.
Well, this is great. I want to ask you more about this wisdom. Let's take a quick, just a few moments for a sponsor break, and we'll come back and talk about some wise words from people you've interviewed before. I'm excited to share Bill as an exclusive sponsor of the Thrivecast. They have been sponsoring the Thrivecast for so long. Thank you, Bill. Our firm has been using Bill for over a decade now. We actually use it in all of our foundational CFO and controllership engagements. We have to turn all of our clients' financial processes digital, and we do that with Bill. And you can check out some webinars and blogs and even toolkits that I build with Bill to help in your firm. So thank you, Bill, for being a sponsor of the Thrivecast. Brett, we're back, and I love Business Owner's Wisdom. This book that it's among, I don't know how many books you have out now. Maybe, I mean, it's just a bunch of people you've
I have a
interviewed.
whole bunch, Jason.
Okay.
Here's a box of them. Ooh. So there's, this box full of
I
them.
have that box, yeah.
4 of them and a couple of others. But the significance of these books is that I lose a job at 22. I read a book that says, if you want to be successful, find people that have done things and ask them what they did. And so I watched a documentary series called 7 Up from the BBC that followed 7 kids every 7 years, and I think they're up to their 60s. It's the most successful documentary in history. And I learned from that I thought that it would be good to stop every 7 years, reflect on where you've been, and write a book, which is kind of slow process in a fast world, to make sure that you don't get off track. Which is what I've observed when I lost my job. I went into an outplacement center, met a lot of 50-year-olds who just got lost. I was like, how did you end up here? And they're like, I don't know, life went quickly. And now they'd lost their jobs, their identity, they didn't know what to do, and they were very stressed. So that's where the books come from, and they're sort of in a series on wisdom, which for your listeners, means deep understanding. And from that old handbook for life, if you get nothing else, get wisdom, and so hence that focus.
Yeah, and your I guess your father embodied a lot of that wisdom in you too, among many other people. Is that
Yeah, I
where
was lucky. My dad was very supportive.
okay? And that's where your desire for mission, values, and purpose came from your family?
I think that my dad was so good to people, and I saw the benefit in his life and certainly in ours of the way he invested in people and treated them and encouraged them. And that showed me that it's really people who have unlimited potential. A photocopy is fixed in the number of pages it can copy per minute, but a person's got this huge potential that sadly often they only really discover when the war starts, as I say, and someone starts shooting at them, and then all of a sudden they have all this capacity. Second World War starts, they send all these young guys off to war and they charge a beach in Normandy, for example. And you think of the bravery required to do that. And you wonder, how did they do that? When maybe months before they were just sitting behind a desk thinking that they were average. So the average person doesn't grow up next to a billionaire, an Olympian, a world-changing person, and they really don't understand that they are really that person, if need be, if they can unlock that. And so that's what I learned through the process of my first book and from my dad was that, everyone's got a story, everyone's interesting, people have huge capacity that often, sadly, they don't realize. And I took that into building our group to say, well, if we could build an environment where people felt safe to be the best they could be, what would happen? I always tell the story that Steve Jobs was an employee at Atari. That's a bad thing to let that talent walk
That's
out the
right.
door. Nelson Mandela was a law clerk in a law firm. Now imagine today if you look out at your people in your firm and say, I got Nelson Mandela over there and Steve Jobs over there, but my leadership doesn't allow them to unlock their full capacity because of my shrinker thinking, as Zig Ziglar would say, or as I say, your small, mean, and scared outlook on life. So many firms I worked in, it was really the leadership didn't want. I actually bought 100% of my boss's old book, and 5 years after he been working with me all that time. He said, "Brett, the problem in the old firm was we had no succession." And I said to him, "Mate, I was sitting right there." And he goes, "Yeah, I didn't see that." And I said, "Well, how could you? Because you were so focused on yourself, you couldn't see anyone else." And so if you position yourself at looking up at the people in your business, not looking down at them, I have this saying, Jason, that life is better when you're looking up rather than down on yourself and others. Most people spend their time with their head down on themselves and looking down on others. And so within their business, they've got these incredible people who can make massive contributions, but they're just ignored because the person is so in themselves, they can't see that person. So that's kind of what I got out of the first book. I interviewed, virtually all the living prime ministers of Australia face to face for an hour, many billionaires, sporting heroes, the leading people in that community. And I've interviewed people like Shaquille O'Neal and Jordan Peterson and others since. An incredible array of interesting people. But the most common theme is that everything that you want to do is done with and through people. And so all your leverage, when people say to me, "I'm trying to grow my firm, I'm trying to leverage my firm." And it's like, well, if you can't look at a person in your business and say, "Through my excellent leadership, our management and the environment in the firm, that person can be 100% more productive," then you can't grow your firm other than by putting sort of more bums on seats, which will lead to you having more bums sitting on
Yeah.
seats.
So it's our leadership. We who own the firm is really what's going to unlock a next generation. We're going to serve them in a way, or even display for them what kind of commitment is required to actually step into leadership. You put a lot of weight on the owner, founder, leader to have to lead well and not blame that younger generation. It sounds like when you talk to people.
Absolutely. Like the really great leaders are serving their people. So they're taking their unique gifts and talents and putting them at the service first of their people so that their people will serve their clients. And that flywheel of essentially, a sense of mission and values and a commitment to a vision that you can make a difference to each of those people means that they will look at the client and say, "Oh, I can make a difference to each of these people." So it's a sense of humility because that's the beginning of wisdom. That's not spoken about much, that word, and a willingness to learn and grow and hold yourself accountable and say, "I think I can do a bit better." Um, and it's literally the opposite of the popular notion of leadership. So you say leadership, and people think, "Okay, here I am, and I'm making a big song and dance." But the best research on the best leaders, books like The Outsiders by Will Thorndike, they talk about, and Jim Collins in Good to Great, quietly determined people. And you can feel the um, the vibration of those people with respect to their commitment to the mission and to you as a team member. And you can feel it. And you can't fake it because people can feel it. It doesn't matter what you say, it doesn't matter the words, it doesn't matter whether your grammar's perfect or you use the right whatevers. People can feel whether you're authentically interested in the best for them. And we call it making people better off, making them healthier, wealthier, and wiser.
Yeah.
And that's your job as a
Yeah.
leader.
It's and sometimes we get in our own way. When I ran our firm in a way that served me, you get in trouble. You get in financial trouble because you make all of that money about you. And I brought a partner in, and she helped me turn things around. And a lot of our community knows Julie really well, but a lot of times she'll say, or would say, "Jason, stop playing against yourself," which is you have such an ability and there's so much you can do, but you're the one that's actually you're you're on the other side of yourself playing against yourself. And she's like, if you would just stop playing against yourself, who you are would actually be something that could be amazing. And And we see that in other people sometimes in our team. They're just so smart, so committed, but some of their own dysfunctions and habits just make them do stupid stuff that are not really who they are. And how do you help people overcome playing against yourself if you're a leader that's meant to pull them to a place you see more than they even see it in themselves? How do you lead them to that place? Or I guess you can't make them
Yeah, so
go.
the good news is, the good news is today, Jason, that there is a lot of research that shows the impact that you have on other people. So you'll read articles that say, one bad performing person in the team can lower the performance of the whole team by a certain percentage. What they don't say is that the really great performance of a person can lift the performance. So if I speak faster, you'll speak faster. If I walk faster, you'll walk faster. If I read more, you'll read more. Your children and your people will basically be very much like you. So we bought into all or part 85 situations, and in all cases, the people and the clients reflected the values of the partner. So when people say to me, "My people don't do this, my people don't do that," I say, "Listen, your people are just being you." And so if you want them to read a book, make sure they know you read 10. If you want them to get fit, make sure you got 10 times fitter. Most people will do 1/10 of what you'll do as a leader. Now, most leaders I meet want people to do twice as much as they did. That's just not how life works. And so, um, one of the practical things that, your audience can learn is that, there's few demands of our partners, but one of the demands of all of our partners is that they must meet every month one-on-one with every single team member in their team. Most firms have an annual review. We have a monthly meeting. You can't have a relationship with people if they don't know you care about them. They can't know you care about them if you don't make time for them. So first day of every month, every partner meets with every team member in their team. 20 minutes and goes through the firm's goals, their performance, their reading list, their development, etc. Now, if you don't show that commitment to your people, then they should show you the commitment that you show them, and they will, which is not much. And so most leaders aren't that committed to their people. They just they say, "But I pay them." It's like saying that you clean a toilet. It's just not even the starting point.
That's right. Yeah. So we basically as leaders have to outlead our team. So we have to always be in front of them and them trying to stretch out to come closer to us. So we're supposed to operate at a higher level, and that's just what we're called to. And that's the hard. Maybe that's the hard part of leadership. It's like that's what you sign up for. Don't sign up for leadership if you don't like what it comes with. Would that be some of your message for leaders?
Absolutely. I think that meaning comes from self-sacrifice, and most people don't want to sacrifice. So they think that leadership is entitlement when it's actually just an opportunity to sacrifice more. So to take on more responsibility and to serve people more is a massive undertaking, and many people are not fit for that role. So if you won't be the servant of others, you're not a leader by definition. Now, you might be a teller, meaning that you tell people stuff, but to unlock the sort of potential of your people, they have to feel cared about. And that takes time and effort and genuine interest. So if you care about somebody, you get to know them. And if you get to know them, you can help them. It'd be difficult to write, a love letter to your wife who's got red hair and say, "Dear darling, I love you because you have blonde hair." She might say, "Did you write the letter to the wrong person? I love you because you like cookies, but I'm a fitness fanatic. I love you because you like rap, but I love classical music." She'd rightly turn around and say, "Is this letter for me?" Most leaders, when I meet them and say, "Where does that team member live? Who do they live with? How many kids do they have? What are their names? What's their hobby? What's their favorite movie? Ice cream? What car do they drive? Where do their parents live?" Are their parents well off, not well off? Are they going to inherit money or not? Have they got any financial obligations outside their immediate self or family that's putting them under pressure? They don't know anything about their people, which demonstrates they don't care because they haven't taken the time to get to know the
So you
people.
equate those together. If you don't know about your team, you don't care about your team.
No doubt about it. It'd be very hard to be telling your wife, you love her and you care about her if you don't know her name. Most leaders, so-called, don't know their people. They treat them like chattel, like a computer, you know? But the reason is it takes time. You need a process, takes a bunch of time. You've got to actually make an effort. And then I get people say, "Yeah, but what happens if I make an effort and they leave?" I go, "What happens if you make no effort and they stay?" Like, it's basic
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah, and that's what it takes for for leadership. What are some things you've done wrong as a leader that you wish you would go back and could change that were big
Yeah, so
learning points
everything
for
that
you?
absolutely. So, Jason, everything that I tell you, and, I have an Instagram account, and some people say, "Oh, Brett, you posted this." And I say, "Listen, you might think I'm speaking to you. I'm just speaking to myself." If I publicly publish and speak and espouse values and ideas and behaviors, that forces me to work harder at living those, values, ideas, behaviors. And so the biggest lesson I had early on was that you're not the boss because you hire, you're the boss because you're prepared to fire. I had a guy, he was turning up late, he wasn't doing what he should do, and he was a negative impact on other people. I left it. I thought he might get better. I left it. Then eventually one day I said, "Mate, you're not on the same bus. You need to leave." He left. I got the whole team together. We had about 6 people at the time, and we've now got about 700. And I said, "Jason, I said to them, hey guys, I had to let Johnny go. He hasn't done this, this, and this." I said, "Are you guys okay?" And they all said, "You should have done that 3 months ago." And so it taught me that, um, your team want you to lead. They don't want you to make them lead.
That is true.
So I said to them, "Well, why didn't you tell me?" And they were like, "We didn't want to sign his death certificate. That's your job." So if you want the position, the title, the money, the status, whatever of that role, you have to take on the hard parts of that role. And, a lot of people are up for the good bits, not so much up for the hard bits. Probably the second big lesson is over promoting people. So I'm very hopeful about people. I'm like, I can see your potential. If you'll really commit, you could be amazing. But then I realize some people, they have the potential, but they don't really want to make the commitment. You can't do someone else's commitment. And so I'd promote somebody and knowing that they could do it, and then be really disappointed when they didn't. I'd be like, what's wrong with this person? Because to me, I couldn't understand why, if you had that capability to make that difference, you wouldn't. But I realized that you can't put your own commitment into someone else. And so they're the two standout lessons. You're not the boss because you're prepared to fire, but hire. You're the boss because you're prepared to fire. And the second one is sort of very much that story. It's quite
Yeah.
confronting.
No, those are hard leadership lessons. Well, what would be your message now to maybe US firms, things they really need to be thinking about as a priority right now with all that we have going on, private equity buying generations out, younger people not coming into the profession. We're after, a very tumultuous election that the whole world is wondering what it's going to do to us. What would you say this is really the priority you should think about? And also the other side of that, what should they stop doing? What are some of the things these firms should really consider stop doing now?
So look, the foundation of your life is, just the other side of the coin is to the foundation of your business. And so a growing business is led by a growing person. So you have to work on your mission, your values, your vision, and then you take that into the business. You can't outperform yourself in your business. And you might for a short time, but ultimately you're one person. I think that your new large orange president um, has one big lesson for people, um, at least one. But one of them is that, promises made, promises kept. He was asked, well, how are you going to govern? He said, well, promises made, promises kept. It's fundamental to anything you want to do to keep your promises. And so where the political class really struggle is they say they're going to do things and then they don't do them, or they often do the exact opposite, right? So you're far better off to say, I'm going to do whatever people think's the most objectionable thing, so long as you do it politically, than to say you're going to do wonderful things and then either not do it or do the opposite. So I think that life is more simple than people make out, and so is business. They're two sides of the same coin. And so those first two things, like clear focus, mission, values, vision, promises made, promises kept. Most firms and their leadership don't keep their promises. They just don't. You'll be a partner next year, Jason. Next year comes, you'll be a partner next year, Jason. You'll be a partner. They do it in pricing as well. They say to the client, that'll be 10 to 15,000. The client hears 10, the partner hears 15. They send them a bill for 20. So they're just fundamentally incapable of keeping their promises. It's so, so important. In terms of things I would stop doing, I would be clear about what the value of my life is. So the average man in America lives to say 78. The average woman lives to say 82. Look up the numbers, whatever they are, 85, 80. Call it 80 to round it up, make the number easy. If you're 50 and you're going to live to 80 and you intend to work for another 10 or 15 years, you've got 1,800 billable hours a year, 10 of those, you really do need to say your life is defined by who you spend time with. Are these people going to come to my funeral? Am I spending my time with the right people, doing the right things in the right way to make the right difference? Again, that's a self-reflection process. And most people will answer that, 20% of their clients are not clients, should not be there, never should have been there, and no one knows how they got there. So to stop doing work for people that don't value you, to stop being in essentially relationships that are one-sided, where they don't value you, that'll change your self-esteem. That's a basic act of self-respect. That'll change your ability to price, because you'll value yourself differently, because you'll get yourself out of all of the abusive relationships you got yourself in, where you're being bashed up and gaslighted. And you will be changed by who you spend time with. And so the higher quality, straight Buffett quote, hang around with better quality associates because they'll make you better. It goes for your team, it goes for your clients, etc. So stop hanging around with people that don't share your values, don't care about you or the firm, don't buy into making a difference through the work they do or the work you do for them. And find yourself better friends. I often say, if you're really desperate for a friend, buy a dog.
They're great.
All right.
They're great
But
friends.
don't go looking for friendship from people that are incapable of extending decency to you.
Great. I love it. Brett, this is such great stuff to hear your wisdom after you've been doing this for so long. People would love to hear more. Like, do you have a location where you write online? Should they follow your Instagram?
Not really. I'm on Instagram and YouTube, and I'll do the odd thing like this, Jason, when somebody asks. But fundamentally, we're trying to change the industry. We're trying to change the orientation of the professionals to be other person focused and understand the dignity of the work they do and the value it makes to people, because in that there's a flywheel of positive meaning. That's really what the business is about. You can turn a profit doing that. That's all good. It is. I am a capitalist, unabashed, unashamed capitalist. I don't believe in unrealized capital gains taxes, for example. because I'm a tax guy, funnily enough. But yeah, online there's plenty of stuff. There's kellypartnersgroup.com.au's our holding company website that's got bunches of videos and different things. There's brettkelly.com.au, which is a website of a whole bunch of books and things and all sorts of stuff. I'm on TikTok. I'm on Instagram. Probably on LinkedIn. I'm all over the place. But if anyone's interested in having a chat, they can just pop me an email, and my PA will definitely pick it up and make some time.
Very cool. Yeah, I was able to see a lot of you on YouTube in prep for the show, so that was really enjoyable. Okay, Brett.
Oh yeah, there's a Be Better Off Show podcast I do. There's about 80 editions. I might start doing some more soon. I really love people. I love to learn, so I do a lot of interviews.
Yeah. Well, yeah, just watching you interview, Jordan Peterson, Shaquille O'Neal. I mean, you you are pretty fascinated in other people, so you pull a lot out of them, and those are
we get a lot of good stuff from people. If you ask them about their story, they'll tell you.
Yeah. And and Jordan Peterson has no lack of words, that's for sure, when you ask him a question. So you can
he was amazing.
learn a lot from him.
He'd spent 10 years consulting to small and medium-sized businesses. A lot of the work that he'd done, most people don't realize he's done. He's a very, very cluey man around business, thoughtful, great. My kids met him. 20 of our clients, met him. With Shaquille, we had 100 clients there. He was great with the kids. People are interesting, whether they're well known or not. So many people have got, great stories. So I find as the way to keep myself growing is to learn from other people.
Yeah, I love it. Well, cool. Well, Brett, thanks for being on the Thrivecast. We really appreciate you in the profession, man.
No problem. It's a great profession.
It is.
It's a place where you can really make a difference. And frankly, it's a huge privilege to sit where we do in people's lives.
Right.
And so it's really up to us the difference that we make while we're sitting there.
Well, thanks for sharing some of those words with us. We appreciate it. We hope you have a good one, man.